Cleopatra did not die the moment Egypt fell. She did not collapse in a dramatic final scene extracted from a theater play. Her end unfolded as a sequence of administrative measures, calculated and relentless. Sealed doors, revoked titles, catalogued treasures, restricted movements. The final violence inflicted upon her was not always a blade or a bite. Often it was a procedure. The slow and methodical stripping of a sovereign transformed into an object worthy of exhibition. On August 1st, 30th of BC, Alexandria surrendered. The city outside the palace still breathed the rhythms of everyday life. Boats on the harbor, vendors in the streets, while inside the royal compound, a different choreography began. Roman cohorts advanced, not as a mob storming chaos, but as an occupying force organized around tasks. Soldiers and clerks took up positions. Sentries were posted at thresholds. Rooms that had been private were treated as sites of state interest. This was an occupation with a purpose, not merely to claim territory, but to transform a living ruler into evidence of conquest. The distinction matters. Ancient sources and most modern historians stress that Octavian's priority was legibility. Rome wanted a clear, legal narrative of victory. That narrative required objects, records, and a performable proof of submission. To achieve it, Roman personnel moved through the palace with two complementary arms of power: the soldier with the spear and the bureaucrat with the ledger. The spear ensured obedience. The ledger converted that obedience into testimony. Inside the palace, the air shifted. Doors were barred not only with locks, but with witnesses. Sealed chambers acquired new meanings. A private room became a restricted archive. Personal items were examined and categorized. Mirrors, cosmetics, and instruments of royal ceremony, things that signaled sovereignty, were subjected to scrutiny. Some of this is reconstruction from later accounts, but the pattern repeats in contemporary analyses of military occupations. Control of space and symbols precedes control of story. Roman guards stationed themselves at staircases and courtyards. Scribes accompanied officers, noting the movement of goods, the presence of seals, the removal of official insignia. Coins, royal signet rings, and administrative documents were matters of state interest. Who possessed them could claim authority. Men in Roman dress separated objects deemed public from those deemed private. An emblem could be recatalogued from crown to spoils, from insignia of a reigning monarch to evidence of defeat. That linguistic reclassification, what officials called things and whom they addressed them to, would become one of the most powerful tools in Rome's hands. These were not random actions. Roman legal and ceremonial logic demanded proof. A triumph in Rome required a demonstrable victory, a captured leader, spoils to display, and an orderly parade that mapped military success into civic authority. Octavian was planning more than possession of Alexandria. He was preparing a spectacle to transform a military conquest into a political legitimacy, mortal and lasting. To supply that spectacle, his forces could not simply kill or exile and then ignore the remains. They had to create a chain of custody, custody of the body, custody of the symbols, custody of the story. 2 days after the occupation began, tradition places a formal audience with Octavian on August 3rd. Ancient accounts describe a scene less like negotiation and more like inspection. Scribes and officials were present. Questions were asked and recorded. What is striking in these descriptions is not the theater of reconciliation, but the absence of real bargaining power. The audience functioned as a bureaucratic process, a gathering to inventory and to document rather than to broker terms. Octavian's aim was transparency, for Rome's record keepers, not for clemency. Procedural delay was itself a weapon in Octavian's hands. Requests from Cleopatra could be filed and then postponed, filtered through layers of permission. Movement could be allowed on condition. Communications could be monitored. For someone whose authority had been embodied in ritual and presence, these halting permissions were a form of disempowerment. There is a chilling precision to it. To stay alive and unmolested, one could ask, but the very act of asking put one inside a system controlled by the occupier. Language followed action. Officials and clerks stopped referring to Cleopatra as queen in the sense of implying sovereignty. They began, instead, to call her the Egyptian or simply the woman, terms that recoded political identity into ethnic or gendered categories, stripping away formal markers of rulership. Modern historians have pointed out that such terminological shifts are not incidental. They are instruments of delegitimization. By changing how a subject is named, a conquering power reshapes the terms in which that subject can be understood and remembered. The Roman presence in the palace creates a series of repetitive scenes. Doors unlatched only with consent. Servants questioned before serving dishes, mirrors, and cosmetics inventoried. Children moved from one part of the compound to another under guard. These are not sensational episodes in the way a fight would be. They are more insidious because they are ordinary. A crown placed on a table becomes, in a ledger, an item to be transported to Rome. A seal worn on a finger becomes a symbol to be proven counterfeitable and thereby deniable as authority. Procedure had the cumulative effect of erasing legitimacy. The situation with Cleopatra's family exposes how procedural control intersected with political expediency. Her eldest son, Ptolemy XV, commonly known as Caesarion, was the most direct dynastic threat to Octavian. Sources agree, though they differ on precise details, that Caesarion's fate was grim. Ancient historians, including Plutarch and Dio Cassius, report that Octavian ordered his execution, an act routinely justified in Roman accounts as an elimination of future risk. Whether the decision was immediate or deliberated through council, the result was the removal of a living claimant. The three younger children, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus, were spared from death, but not spared from a different kind of disinheritance. Rather than being heirs of a Hellenistic dynasty, they were converted into instruments of Roman narrative. They were taken to Rome, presented as trophies, and placed under Roman guardianship, with Octavia, the sister of Octavian and former wife of Mark Antony, assigned a role in their upbringing, according to later accounts. In Rome they were taught Latin, inserted into Roman households, and slowly reformed in the mold of the conquerors. The practical effect was to neutralize their claim to an Egyptian throne by absorbing them into the Roman framework of family and clientage. Visits to the children, when they occurred, were supervised. Contact with their mother became regulated, each encounter mediated by the occupying power's discretion. Even the act of maternal instruction, language, customs, allegiance, could be curtailed by the new custodians. This slow domestic erasure was a quieter version of execution. It ensured dynastic lines would not continue under an independent Egyptian crown. In the space of weeks, the political leverage inherent in family ties had been removed or redirected. If the occupation and the process of reclassification were Octavian's instruments, then Cleopatra's death became a contested hinge upon which competing stories turned. She died roughly 10 days after the occupation began, around August 10th, and ancient testimony gives several different causes. Plutarch reports the familiar tale of a venomous snake, an asp, smuggled into her chamber, a death staged as a classical, tragic suicide. His narrative imbues the ending with symbolism and theatricality. Dio Cassius, however, describes poison as the cause, and Strabo is reported to have been skeptical about the veracity of the snake story. Modern scholars have suggested other possibilities as well. An assisted death arranged to preserve dignity, a cosmetic or hairpin used to administer poison, or a death that combined elements of self-harm and external help. The evidence is ambiguous, and historians must weigh testimony that is itself shaped by the agendas of those who recorded it. We must be careful here. Uncertainty is not a gap to be filled with speculation, but a feature to be acknowledged. The Roman narrative that foregrounds the ASP performs a rhetorical function. It allows a defeated queen to exit in a way that fits classical tropes of regal fatalism, while also removing the need for Octavian to be seen as a brutal executioner. The image of a queen choosing death by snake is theatrically neat. It absolves, in narrative terms, the conqueror. For that reason alone, many scholars caution against accepting one version as the literal truth. Plutarch's account, full of detail and pathos, must be read alongside Dio's and Strabo's reservations, and against the background of Roman motives for controlling the story. What remained after her death was exactly what Octavian needed: an image to substitute for a person. In Rome, the mechanics of political ritual required a demonstration. Triumphs were legal, theatrical events that translated military conquest into civil authority. They demanded a parade, victims, spoils, and a narrative scaffold that justified the triumphator's position. Cleopatra's physical absence did not prevent Octavian from supplying a convincing spectacle. Roman officials arranged for an effigy and for the public display of her children. A likeness of Cleopatra, whether a likeness in wax, cloth, or sculpted form, could be carried through Rome's streets with the same legal effect as a living captive. The presence of her children, now in Roman custody, functioned as living proof that Egypt's royal line had been subordinated. The substitution was effective. The city saw a captured Cleopatra, and the story of triumph was secured. This substitution, image for agency, became the lasting legacy. Across centuries, the Roman representation metastasized into familiar tropes. In Roman propaganda, Cleopatra was often reduced to a figure of erotic danger or exotic allure, an image convenient for the moral narratives Romans wanted to tell about their own victory. Later, literary and artistic receptions, from Roman poets to Shakespeare and beyond, built on these early frames, often reinforcing the reductions. Over time, the complex political actor, who had been a Hellenistic monarch, shrewd diplomat, and administrator, became simplified in memory into a handful of dominant motifs: seductress, tragic lover, exotic queen. These motifs tell us as much about Roman needs and later imaginations as they do about the real Cleopatra. To reconstruct what happened in those last days, we must attend to the mundane as much as to the dramatic. The cataloging of jewelry, the sealing of rooms, the reissuance of titles. Each small act fed into a larger program of cognition to make the conquest legible, reportable, and repeatable. Roman soldiers served as the visible edge of a system that relied on routine actions, orders written down, objects transported, children reassigned, whose accumulative effect erased a political subject. The instruments of sovereignty were removed, repurposed, or rendered into evidence. And through it all, Octavian cultivated an image of orderly victory, one that permitted Rome not only to possess the land, but to claim historical authority over the story of its fall. The process was legal as much as it was military. Rome, a polity invested in precedent and ritual, required documentation to legitimize extraordinary actions. The spectacle in Rome, the triumph, was linked to that requirement. A triumph without demonstrable spoils or captives would be incomplete. Documentary and material evidence provided the bridge from battlefield to Senate. In this sense, Cleopatra's life was converted into a dossier. Items were listed, children's names recorded, an effigy chosen to stand in for the absent body. When the triumph took place in Rome years later as part of Octavian's larger program of legitimation, the display was coherent because the pieces had been assembled in Alexandria first. What cannot be overstated is how thoroughly Rome controlled the narrative, not merely of what happened, but of what it meant. The occupiers had incentives to preserve certain images and suppress others. A publicly messy execution or an image of Roman cruelty could complicate Octavian's claim to pietas and order, The version of events that foregrounded Cleopatra's voluntary death fit better into the moral universe Octavian wanted to sell his fellow Romans. A tale of a queen defeated, choosing death under the weight of fate. Whether that was how she died is uncertain. What is clear is that Rome profited from the story and promoted it. Even the choice of words mattered in crafting collective memory. When Roman writers labeled her Egyptian in ways that emphasized foreignness, they were not simply recording ethnicity. They were deploying a rhetorical device that othered her and made her a fit subject for moralizing tales. Her sovereign identity, the rituals, honors, and authority she wielded in Alexandria, was gradually recast as personal eccentricity or foreign decadence. That rhetorical work outlived her. In art, literature, and political discourse across the Roman world and into later European culture, Cleopatra became a cipher onto which anxieties about power, gender, and empire could be projected. The fate of her children illustrates how memory was institutionalized. Parading the children was not merely an emotional coup. It operationalized the conquest's transfer into Roman hands. Their presence at the triumph said what legal claims could not: that the line of Ptolemaic kings had been appropriated, their heirs absorbed. Later, the children's Romanized lives, like that of Cleopatra Selene, who eventually married King Juba II of Mauritania, show how absorption, rather than annihilation, became the imperial strategy for eliminating political threats. Absorption rewrites inheritance. It converts claims to foreign thrones into alliance or clienthood under Roman terms. When historians examine the tale centuries later, they are attentive to sources and to silences. Plutarch provides vivid narrative detail and a moralized reading. Dio Cassius offers chronological breadth and political commentary. Strabo introduces geographic and skeptical notes. Each source has its biases, and each contributes fragments. Modern historians, aware of propagandistic incentives, reconstruct a plausible sequence by cross-referencing these testimonies with archaeological data and the known mechanics of Roman ritual. The result is a portrait of a regime of control in which procedural moves were the instruments of conquest. It is tempting to imagine Cleopatra's last moments as cinematic. She chooses a noble death before a hostile world. That image is effective, but it risks overlooking the administrative reality that many of the tools of power in antiquity were not swords, but papers, not prisons, but protocols. To understand Cleopatra's tragic end, we need to acknowledge the machinery behind the spectacle. Soldiers stood guard, yes, but their presence mattered most because it enabled clerks and officials to operate, from cataloging to correspondence to the reclassification of identity. The consequence of turning a living ruler into evidence lasted long beyond the days in Alexandria. Once a narrative is widely circulated through the instruments of empire, coinage, official reports, literary accounts, public triumphs, it becomes difficult to dislodge. For centuries, the Roman frame shaped Cleopatra's reception. It was convenient to treat her as an emblem of Oriental despotism or sexual wile because such portrayals justified Rome's civilizing pretensions. Even modern retellings often recycle those images, sometimes with corrective intent, sometimes not. But there are other ways to see those final days. As a woman encircled by forms of power she had once wielded. As a sovereign whose instruments of rule were taken from her one measured item at a time. As a mother trying to negotiate the survival of her children under surveillance. As an actor whose agency was constricted not only by force, but by the slow, suffocating efficiency of bureaucracy. Empathy with Cleopatra's position need not romanticize her. It simply recognizes that the procedure of occupation can be as destructive as a blade. When we look back, it is important to remember the broader stakes. Octavian was not merely defeating Antony and Cleopatra in a military sense. He was reordering the map of Mediterranean rulership and administering the telling of that order. The office of triumph, the legal fabric of the Roman state, and the habits of record-keeping were all components of a political technology that could make history conform to desired meanings. Cleopatra's person could be absent. Her image could be present. History could be made to show a line from battlefield to civic glory. The ambiguity surrounding her death is therefore emblematic of the larger problem. If we cannot be certain whether an asp, poison, a hairpin, or assistance ended her life, we can be much surer about the program that followed. The careful dismantling of authority, the reclassification of identity, the processing of heirs, and the manufacture of a triumph. These were not incidental acts, but systematic, purposeful steps designed to ensure that Rome's narrative prevailed. In remembering Cleopatra's last days, we should attend both to the drama and to the ledger. We should hear, alongside the stories of mythic snakes, the scratch of styluses on wax tablets, the stamping of seals, the names entered in inventories. These were the sounds of conquest as much as any battle cry. And when an effigy marched through Rome and the children were shown to an expectant populace, the triumph performed what the paperwork had prepared. It turned a political defeat into a civic archetype. Cleopatra's tragic end, then, is not reducible to a single sensational image. It is a study in the power of procedure, the way a civilization can erase sovereignty by altering the conditions of recognition. Who is called by what title? Who keeps what tokens? Who is permitted to move and to speak? The soldiers who occupied Alexandria mattered less for force than for the order they enforced. The order that turned a queen into a spectacle and replaced a living political subject with an image suitable for Rome's triumph. If you find this kind of close re-examination of history engaging, subscribe for more episodes that peel back the ritual and the paperwork behind the moments we think we know. In the end, the most lasting violence done to Cleopatra was not necessarily the manner of her physical death, but the conversion of her life into a narrative chosen by those who prevailed. Her agency, her policies, and her rule were eclipsed by a crafted image. That image proved durable. It suited Rome's needs, and it continued to serve storytellers for centuries. But when we reconstruct her last days through the combined evidence of occupation protocols, testimonies from Plutarch, Dio, and Strabo, and modern historiographical analysis, another picture emerges. One of a carefully managed subjugation in which administrative control, delay, and linguistic reclassification did the greater part of the work. The palace doors sealed, the seals catalogued, the children reassigned, the effigy prepared. These are the concrete steps of a political ending, and they remind us that power often operates most effectively through routine. Cleopatra's tragedy was not only an image of a queen's death, it was the triumph of a bureaucratic logic that transformed a living ruler into something Rome could hold, parade, and forget. For all the poetry of snakes and theatrical death, it is worth pausing to consider the quieter acts, the ledgers and the lists, the new names assigned by clerks, the delayed permissions, and the rituals that turned life into evidence. What remains is the question of who controls the past. Rome controlled a version of Cleopatra's end that suited its purposes. Later generations inherited that version because it was performative and reproducible. Our task now is to look past the triumphal images and to read the administrative marks they left behind. Those sealed rooms, those catalogued treasures, those supervised visits. There we find the most telling testimony of how her final days were shaped. Not only by fate, chance, or a single dramatic act, but by the steady, often invisible work of turning a sovereign into an exhibit. If you want to dive deeper into other episodes of ancient political theater, how ritual and paperwork shaped empires, check out the related videos and sources in the description.